Childhood, adolescent, adulthood, and elderhood. Welcome to Beyondhood, where we go beyond elderhood, one chat at a time.
Beyondhood has launched a new service in 2024, storytelling. Do you want to record your parents or your grandparents' life story in their own voice? Contact me and see how I can help you. My contact info is in the show notes. Hello everyone, welcome to Beyondhood podcast number 4. Today I had the pleasure to interview Mary, who is originally from Scotland and is one of the most hardworking and dedicated nurses I've ever met. Her grandson Archie hired me to record her story as a family legacy. I'm so honored to be a part of this gift. Side note, the first 10 minutes of this episode might sound like we're swimming under the sea because after the interview, I realized that the microphone didn't plug properly. Oh my god, I know. I spent so many hours trying to fix it. On the bright side, I'm grateful that I didn't lose it completely. Welcome to Beyondhood. First of all, what is your name?
Mary.
And where are you from, Mary?
Scotland, West Coast.
How old are you this year?
87.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up on the West Coast of Scotland.
And what was it like there?
It was very beautiful, but that was very high rainfall.
What was your childhood like?
A happy, carefree childhood. My father was a haulage contractor, but particularly interested in horses. My mum was a stay-at-home mum.
You grew up with the horses?
During the summer months, he used them to pull colourful horse-drawn vehicles, and the visitors to the west coast of Scotland enjoyed that when it wasn't raining.
Did it rain a lot?
It rained a great deal.
How old were you that you learned how to ride a horse?
Oh, I can't remember when I couldn't ride. I was encouraged to ride from a very early age, and when I was very young, I had a tiny Shetland pony, old Flora. Flora was very naughty. Oh, she would nip you and run off, and she was just very mischievous.
Did both your parents like the horses?
My mother didn't like the horses. She was afraid of them. Yes, I love horses. I had my own pony. I had Flora, and then I had Molly. And when I outgrew Flora.
How long did you have Molly for?
Till I left to go and work in the hospital in Glasgow. But with pigs and hens.
Lots of animals in the house. Were lots of people have horses where you live?
No, not a lot. My father was very, very interested in horses, and he during the summer months he had probably 8 to full horse-drawn coaches that he had, and he got them from markets in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, as opposed to the south.
How many horses do you guys have?
Well, during the summer we had anything up to 8, but during the winter it was really only 2 because they had to be stall-fed.
You grew up with the horses?
Yes, very much so.
Fun fact, Mary later told me that a lot of the parts that were used from the horses in transportation back in the day, she donated to the Riverside Museum in Glasgow. So if you're interested, don't forget to go check it out. Do you have any siblings?
No.
When you were a child, were there any family tradition that you enjoy a lot with the horses?
After the horses, because it's a 7-day week, you don't have Saturday off. I enjoyed working with the horses, although occasionally I got tired.
Yeah.
But it was popular among my friends.
Oh, with the horses?
Yes.
Did they come to you a lot?
My father encouraged me. I had 8 male cousins, so I was what was called a tomboy.
Tell us more about that.
A lot of them left school earlier, and but still some of them went to school in Edinburgh that the family now go to Fettes College in Edinburgh.
Who was your best friend when you were a child? Do you remember?
Ellen.
Ellen.
I still talk to Ellen once a week on the phone. Very mischievous. Oh, she would do all sorts of things to distract people. She would knock the doors and run off one thing, and she would do anything for fun. And so we speak once a week. She's 1 year older than I am.
What was the most naughty thing you guys have done it together?
Smoking. But to begin with, we smoked cinnamon sticks because we couldn't afford cigarette. If it was cigarette, we shared it.
How does it work, cinnamon stick?
It was dreadful. Burns your lips, but we did it just to be different.
And where does Ellen now? Where she lives?
She lives in the same village. She hasn't moved. She had a career in catering. She was very good. She still is very good. She still is very amusing. She had red hair and freckles.
And you still talk to her once a week?
Yes.
Wow, your friendship, how long has it been?
Well, she's 1 year older than I am, so she's 88.
Wow.
So it'll be 86 years, I suppose.
Wow.
Because we were friends from the time we were small.
Wow, how did you keep that friendship?
Because my parents lived in the same village, and when I went home to visit them, I always met.
Wow, that's such a friendship that you maintained for so long.
She worked harder on it than I did. She still phones me if there's any gossip in the village.
How long did you spend your childhood in the same house?
All of my childhood in the same house.
Do you remember what was the favorite room in the house that you grew up with?
Kitchen. It's where everything happened. And where my mother baked her delicious pancakes, which we still eat, still use the same recipe.
And you keep it passed on. You make the same recipe.
Yeah, and Lorna does.
For context, Lorna is Mary's daughter.
You should ask her to make some for you. Good at making them.
Do you remember what this smell like?
Yes, I remember the smell. You would smell them as you approach the house. And she made special scones, griddle scones, cook on flat base called a griddle.
I did a quick research on what is the griddle scone. It is a variety of scone that is cooked on a griddle on the stove top rather than baked in the oven. I remember you mentioned you went to boarding school. When did you go to boarding school?
When I was 12 or 13. It was a state boarding school.
How come your parents decided to send you to the boarding school?
Well, it's the only way you could get a higher education.
How far was the boarding school from you?
About approximately 50 miles.
And did you enjoy the boarding school?
Yes, I did. Once I got used to it. I was homesick to start with. I got used to it and I made lots of friends.
And what was the boarding school like? Can you share some stories?
It was cold. The boarding house that I was in was close on the top of the hill by the open sea, and there was no heating apart from one room. So it was so cold it was unbelievable. Only in one room, the study room, is in the west coast of Scotland.
How cold did it get if there's no heating?
Very cold. But you got used to it up to a point.
What was the teacher like? And did you get to go home a lot?
Not a lot. Half term and hot school holidays, of course. And I wasn't allowed to go home because we were caught climbing on the roof to sunbathe instead of going to church.
What was the punishment?
We get home weekend and they're confined to the boarding room while other people were at home or out enjoying themselves.
Do you still maintain the friendship with the people you met?
Some of them. I did for many years, but by the time they reached my age, a lot of them are dead. When my husband died and we sold the family house, Lorna did last year, and I thought I might go home, but there's nobody there that I know now. And then I discovered the same applies here. But
the memory were very good when you were there.
There's lots of memories.
How long were you in the boarding school for?
2 or 3 years. And then I went to Glasgow. Because at the end of the 3 years you sit the special exams called Hires and Lowers. If you got the right, achieve a certain level before you could apply for university, college, or whatever you want, whatever you're interested in.
I look it up. The Scottish Higher Qualification is roughly the equivalent to the A-level pupils taken in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. After the boarding school, and you did the higher, and then what did you choose to study?
Nursing, because I like people and I like communicating with people. I like the uniform.
I remember you mentioned that you had an aunt that had influence on you.
She was a nurse. It was my father's sister. She was tiny, but she was very, very resilient. She, at that time, trained as a nurse and then went to work as a nurse in the oil field in the country which was known as Persia.
I had to look it up afterward. Persia is the modern day known as Iran, which is a country in West Asia.
And she was one of the influences.
Are there other factors that made you want to become a nurse?
I like the uniform.
What was the uniform like?
Blue dress, pretty blue, white stiff collars and cuffs, and flowing. I'll show you. It's a photograph. That's when I was a senior nurse who called a sister.
Oh, wow! Don't worry. I have put the photograph on the Beyond Hope website. Go under podcast, then you will see what Mary looks like when she was a nurse.
Promoted to become a ward sister.
We'll get to that in a little bit. So you decided you want to become a nurse, so you had to go to the school.
You had to sit an entrance exam.
What was it like?
Easy. Yeah, the one I sat just happened to be easy.
What was the nursing like when you studied? Do you have
Hard
to pick
work,
it?
long hours, 12 and a quarter hours a night. And you learned a lot about life and the impact of illness on families. I was training in Glasgow, which was at that time, it has improved, I believe, since a drunken city, so alcohol played a large part.
Did you have to choose particular what field when you were doing nursing?
While you're training, and it's 3 years, it's broken down into 3 to 3 months of each specialty. And then at the end of 3 years, you sit the final exam, which would make me senior. And then you can choose. Only then. You can't choose where you train or the area.
What did you pick?
Medicine.
What does that mean, medicine?
Not surgery and not dermatology. And I was a sister in a medical ward when that was taken.
What does a sister mean?
The boss.
How did you become the boss?
Well, I was offered the post. I was very fortunate because I was quite young to be a sister.
Which hospital? Was it in Glasgow?
In Glasgow. Very large.
And how long were you there for?
Oh, many years.
Could you share any story that is the most memorable for you?
You found you got attached to patients with long-term illnesses. It was always very traumatic when they died because by then they were your friends.
I remember you mentioned you particularly like night ward, right? Nighttime.
I like night work because you got to know your patients. You had, in most situations, you had time to sit by the bed and talk to them, and that was very welcome.
What was your favorite part of talking to them, of being a nurse?
I liked the idea that you offer them the opportunity to download their problems and details of their illnesses. Many of them would be dying. They could talk to medical staff about that, but they didn't often talk to their own family because it would upset them.
Was nursing a popular industry to choose from?
Quite popular, but you could never fulfill the need. We're always short of, still today, short of nurses. It's hard work.
Did you do a lot of shift work as well?
Yes, it was all shift work.
Was there any particular patient that you still remember?
Yes, there was one very nice man. He was only 27, Peter Clyde, and he was dying of lung cancer. And he and I were very good friends, and so at night I spent any free time I had talking to him. I was there when he died, and that's what he wanted.
Since you were a nurse, you witnessed a lot of death. How did it make you feel?
At first it was frightening. I was young myself because you're exposed to death from the minute you become a student. You don't wait until you're qualified. So it was hard because I hadn't seen, well, maybe I did see my granny when she died.
What's the most rewarding part of your job?
To see people go home cured, reunited with their family.
What was the most challenging part of your work?
Getting through it, managing to fulfill the needs, because we were always short-staffed.
Have you ever thought of quitting, not being a nurse?
No. I wish I had studied medicine instead of nursing, not because I didn't like nursing, but because it was better paid and more scientific. That aunt that I mentioned earlier, the one that went to Persia to work in the oil fields, she was my idol. So she was a nurse, so I was a nurse.
You finished school, training was in Glasgow, and then where did you go for the hospital?
The hospital was in Glasgow. It's all incorporated.
How long were you in the same hospital for?
About 10 years.
Did you also meet your husband there?
Yes.
How did you guys meet?
I was teaching nursing one ward and he was a doctor looking after the patients in the same ward.
What was your first impression of him when you guys met?
He looks quite interesting. Well, friendly, and I noticed he was very kind to the patients. He took time to address the patients.
Who started talking to who first?
He approached me.
What did he say?
And the first date, he took me out for dinner, so it was probably, would you like to come out for dinner? I remember the first act because we sat in the bar before going into dinner and he said, excuse me, I have a phone call to make. And he went away and he was away for ages and ages and ages. I said, well, this won't do, I'll bin him.
Gentlemen, if you're on a first date, maybe it's not best to talk on a phone call for a long time. Otherwise, the lady might want to bin you. What happened? And he came back. What was the call?
His sister, he said.
How did that first day go?
Very correct. It was very correct. With collar and tie, smartly dressed in a smart restaurant. That impressed me.
How did he make you feel?
Curious.
How long did you guys date before marriage?
Not very long because he had arranged by then to come down to take a post. First he remained in Lambeth as a general practitioner. So we had to, and I was in Glasgow. And so I suppose we had a short engagement and then got married and moved down to London permanent.
Wow, that's such a quick decision. And later it was less than a year before they start dating till their engagement. You know he was the one, so you decided to come down with him, or he asked it to you too? How do you know he was it?
You don't know, you just take a chance on it. Could have got it wrong.
And what made you feel that you're going to take the chance with him?
Well, I loved him. And it was exciting coming to London. I had only been to London once before, and it all happened in London. Approximately 26.
At this age, you came down 26 with your husband. Did you stay in nursing?
I never did anything else other than nursing. I varied the topics and the areas I worked in, but it was always within the nursing structure. Later changed to teaching nursing.
What did you have to teach?
Well, a lot. Anatomy and physiology, hygiene, an endless list.
Did you have any student that was as naughty as you were when you were in boarding school?
Didn't get to that level with them. They were only with me for an hour or 2 hours at the most time. I taught for the rest of my career. I moved to a hospital nearer home and taught. At
this stage, why keep you going in nursing?
What kept me going?
Yeah.
Because I enjoyed it. I found it self-satisfying.
Even when you moved to teaching nurses instead of practicing?
Yes. Not quite as exciting and rewarding, but satisfying.
At this point, I know you have 2 children. Could you share a little bit more about them with us?
Well, Alan was the firstborn. He was a very good baby. Didn't cry much as long as you gave him plenty to eat. Lorna was very active. As she is now, she hasn't changed. She was very active.
What would you say your favorite story about them, or your most memorable? The one that popped in.
Lorna climbed out our bedroom window, one up, and was swinging round the window post. When my neighbour saw her, we were frightened to call out in case He distracted her and she fell down onto the concrete below. So he kept her talking while I went up and tried. We got out. Lorna was hard work in a particularly naughty way, but she was very active and very clever at school.
And at that story, were you able to catch her?
Yeah, after that we put bars up in the windows.
It does sound like someone though. Kind of like your story when you're in boarding school.
Yeah, there were similarities.
When you were doing nursing and having 2 children at the same time, how did it...
And a husband that overworked. He was very, very hardworking, loved his work, and his patients loved him because he made himself available for them.
What particular was a doctor at?
General practice.
What was the system like in here back then? Was it in NHS or was it private?
It was NHS. He could go private, but he worked in Lambeth, which is a very poor area. I don't think he had any private patients, but there were 1 or 2 private patients in the practice, mainly members of Parliament. But he went on to get involved in the people who worked in Parliament, and of special interest he became general practitioner to the Nigel Lawson, senior minister, and because of that we were invited to attend Downing Street parties sometimes.
What was the party like?
Very formal.
Did you enjoy it?
More curious than anything else. Well, everyone was very formal and very smartly dressed, and it was in the House of Commons on the River Thames. For me, coming from the west coast of Scotland, that was quite an adventure.
Have you enjoyed your adventure in London so far?
Yes, I enjoy living in London. In the earlier days I missed the Highlands, and I was pleased to have the opportunity to return there at least twice a year. But London's an interesting city, and I'm interested in the arts, so you couldn't be in a better city for that.
When you were in London in your 30s, your husband worked a lot, you started to have 2 kids, and you also have to teach at nurse. What was it like back then to be a mom and also have to work?
I worked 4 days a week. Hard work. I paid for someone to clean the house, but it was hard work. But I enjoyed it.
In that time, were there lots of working moms?
Yes, not as many as now, but yes, there were.
What was the most fulfilling part of being a nurse and teach?
To see people recover from illnesses and to think that you had a hand in it, and to see them leave happy and content.
This made you feel happy?
Yes, I enjoyed my work.
I know we mentioned a little bit you came from Scotland. When the kids were growing up, was Scottish culture very important in your family?
Yes, we tried hard to promote it. Every year we had a Burns supper. You know, Burns was a famous Scottish poet, Robbie Burns, and we had a special Burns suppers in January of each year when we invited lots of people, too many really, for supper, and recited his poetry and made it Alan's friends particularly liked it.
Robert Burns. For those of you who don't know, he was a Scottish poet. He wrote in the Scotch language, English with some Scottish word. His most famous work is probably the song Al Lun San, which is sung by people in the UK and other countries when they celebrate the New Year. What clans were you from?
I was from the clan Campbell.
Can you share a little bit with us? What does it mean to be part of a clan?
There'll be social functions, and if you're interested in the history, plenty of reading and filming. It's more of an historical nature.
You host a Burns traditional dinner. And were you into
25th of January?
And was it every year?
Well, you didn't have to. We celebrated it every year.
Was it something that you like, hosting dinner party?
It's hard work. I liked it. I did a lot of it. Medical, very often because of my husband's work. We'd be entertaining, visiting physicians, often from the States, or people he worked with. You know, dinner parties for maybe 8 or 10.
It sounds like you had a very busy life.
I did. I like it that way.
You were doing nursing, and was nursing the job you retired at as well?
Yes, but I was quite senior by then. I was what was called a nursing officer.
Could you share a bit on that? Because you were saying you were teaching most of the time. So how did you get to such senior level?
Hard work and recognition. I worked very hard. I enjoyed it.
Were you practicing as well, or you were only teaching?
Practicing as well. I taught for a percentage of the week, 2 days. And when I left nursing at the age of 60, I trained to become a Samaritan, and I worked for the Samaritans for 10 years. So when I was 70, I retired completely.
How do you transition from being a nurse to doing volunteer work?
Well, but it was easier moving from being a nurse to volunteer work than it would be from most occupations. The Samaritans are a group of people from all walks of life. You name it. There was joiners, there was city businessmen, there was all sorts of professions represented in the Samaritans.
Could you share with us a bit more of the Samaritan work? What was it like? What could you share with us?
A phone line or a personal caller in some instances. A phone line that people in distress of any form can phone free of charge, and there's people there. In my centre there was 3 people, always 3 people on duty. And you introduced yourself by saying, Samaritans, can I help you? And it's up to them to decide how much or how little you want to discuss. But sometimes the calls lasted hours.
What was one that you remembered the most?
A young doctor who took his life, and I was talking to him mid-morning because suicide was a big factor in the work. He said he was going to take his life, and he gave me the reasons why. And we talked for a long time, and I thought I had persuaded him to reconsider, but then he just went out and killed himself.
Mary dedicated her whole life to nursing. Even for her retirement, she dedicated her time to Samaritan, which is a charity that responds to any call for help. They are for people who are struggling to cope, who need someone to listen without judgment or pressure. Their mission is to make suicide prevention a priority. Your job was very intense.
That was very intense. Working with the Samaritans was very intense, especially in London where there was so much trauma.
What made you keep going for 10 years?
Because people appreciated it. You weren't allowed to agree to talk to the same person each time, but you felt as if you were really doing good work. I felt as if I was fortunate in my marriage and in my family, and it would be nice to give something back.
What else did you do after you retired?
Gardening. I'm a very keen gardener, and it's part of my sadness of leaving the family home because I had a beautiful garden.
You did a specific Japanese type of flower.
Yeah, ikebana.
Can you share with us more what ikebana is?
It's sparse. You only use 2 or sometimes 3 flowers in one, but it's not a bank of flowers. It's an artistically arranged small. I did that for 1 Saturday a month for a long time, and I really loved it.
How did you find ikebana? How did you first started it?
It was strange. I knew about ikebana, and I was in Tokyo because it's of Japanese origin. And my daughter-in-law, who has tragically died, arranged for me to have a lesson at the university because they take it very seriously in Japan. And it was a brilliant lesson, and so I asked her if she could recommend anyone in London where I could go and continue learning ikebana. So she gave me the name and address of a lady in London, and when I showed it to my husband, strangely enough, it was one of his patients, and it was her. I went to her class for the next 10 years, only 1 Saturday a month.
I did some research on this. According to Marie Kondo, you know, the Netflix guru of tidying up, on her website, KonMari, it said ikebana is the centuries-old Japanese art of arranging flower. The practice, which roughly translates to making flowers come alive, use carefully selected blossom, greenery, and other flora to convey a specific feeling or emotion to an observer, just as a painting or a sculpture might. This Japanese flower arrangement has a very minimalistic feel, and choosing each piece is as important as the final composition itself. The process is deliberate and reflective. In fact, many of the principles from Marie Kondo actually apply to ikebana flower arrangement, specifically honoring in what sparks joy, You were quite busy after retiring. You were volunteering.
I'm a busy person. I don't like being idle.
What else did you learn during your retirement?
Italian. Did a no level in Italian.
Did you learn it by yourself?
No, because I'm no linguist. It was a discipline. I love Italy and I love being with Italians. So I went to a class, long morning, a week. She was a very good teacher. She had to be to get me through a no level in Italian.
You were a busy retiree. You learned Ikebana, Italian, Samaritan.
I was afraid of vegetating when I retired. And so I set up that. 3 items that I knew I was interested in. I hadn't found the time to cultivate them, but so I worked hard on that. I worked hard, particularly hard in Italian because didn't come to me.
Why particularly Italy and Italian?
I love the country and I love the people. I like food.
What's it like in Italy when you
went to a summer school, my husband and I, each year, different venue.
How old were you and your husband at that time?
Well, it was after the children left school, but it was up until about the year he died. Well, there was mainly people in our age group who were interested in Italian and hadn't at the time the ability to study it while they were younger. And we had a very good leader who always found an interesting venue in the country. Family hotels, places where you could speak to Italians.
What is the one phrase in Italian that you still remember that you say all the time?
Ciao.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge in your life?
Learning Italian.
If you can go back, will you change anything about how you learn Italian?
I would have started earlier. I would have gone to Italy more often, although I did go to Italy often, eventually.
Now looking back at your life, what would you say has been your biggest success and why is it so important to you?
My family. I'm very proud of my family.
What particular in your family that you're most proud of?
Well, their achievements, but also as people, they're sociable.
Right now, your relationship, what are the most important ones? So you still talk on the phone?
Yeah. My children, my family.
And how do you maintain that relationship?
Mainly now by phone.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I saw more of them. I don't see enough of Archie.
Archie is Mary's grandson.
That's inevitable.
What was the secret of your marriage that lasted so long and happily?
It had its ups and downs, rough patches, but I think most marriages do. We shared professionally, we had a lot to share. We were both sociable, we liked entertaining our friends. And we enjoyed walking. We walked with friends at the weekend.
When you have an argument, how do you resolve it?
That's a tricky one. Sometimes by discussion, but sometimes by just settling for whatever was available.
You still miss him every day?
Do I miss him?
Yeah.
Yes, every day.
Earlier, you shared with us if you could have done it again.
I would have studied medicine instead of nursing. I enjoyed my nursing career immensely, so I still would like to go a medical degree, but it wasn't crucial.
We touch base on your childhood, your adolescence, your adulthood, and your elderhood. What do you think of death? Are you religious? Do you believe in the afterlife?
I believe in the afterlife. Yes, I do.
Particular for you, Mary, because you, as a nurse, you have witnessed so many transitions, birth, death, and at this point, how do you see it?
I see it as it comes to all of us in whatever form, and I don't think we have any control over final stages.
What is the biggest change you have seen?
And I'm pleased it's easier for gay people. There's been quite a change in that area.
Right now, what are you most looking forward?
Who's the wedding again? I'd like to continue with my and I'd like to go back to Italy more often, but I won't now at 87. Just travelling is tiring. I'm sad about that because I used to go twice a year.
One thing I want to ask you is, what is your advice to this generation and the next generation to come?
Get out there and get on with it. Whatever you're interested in, don't be discouraged because there's always people ready to discourage you.
A wrap for our conversation. Thank you so much for being with us.
Not at all.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Before you leave, if you love this episode, please stay tuned for our next one. If you haven't done so, please follow Beyondhood in your favorite podcast listening app. or you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you found this conversation inspirational or interesting or valuable, chances are you did, since you're still listening. Would you do me a personal favor, a 6-second favor? Share it on your social, email, or tell a friend. Tell a person you know who can benefit from this conversation, who you think will be inspired by our Beyonder, who is navigating how to age with grace and motivation so that they can join and be part of our mission. You guys can discuss. When a podcast becomes a chat becomes an action. Then we're closer to create an intergenerational community through one chat at a time. Lastly, if you love this episode, please support by being a member of the podcast so that I can keep looking for new Beyonder and continue the show.
Childhood, adolescent, adulthood, and